just do so. This is a great support and encouragement to the political prisoners, and the volunteers will explain to you the best way to do it. So we'll continue, and so we were supposed to have a speaker online, but we had some technical glitch, and we hope that now everything is going to be all right. And Assad al-Achi will join us. He's president of the Syrian Center for Media and Freedom of Expression from Syria, so that he can share the lessons learned for the Syrian recovery.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me. It's quite an honor to be with you. I will be speaking slowly so that interpretation is taken care of. So my name is Asad Lashi. I'm the executive director, or was the executive director, of a Syrian organization called Beitna. And currently I'm the president of the Syrian Center for Media and Freedom of Expression. And I would like to talk to you today a bit about Syria. I think, Syria and Ukraine have a lot to share together, not only a same criminal enemy, but many other things. So, as you all know, on the 8th of December, Syria finally witnessed a major change, and on the 8th of December last year, 2024, the criminal regime of Bashar al-Assad was toppled, and a new administration took power in Damascus. I will not focus on the history of the conflict, but more on where we're at today when it comes to the rebuilding of Syria. And what I mean by rebuilding is not just the infrastructural and physical rebuilding of Syria, but more how the country together is being put together again in terms of social and economics, etc., and the many challenges the country is undergoing at the moment. So the current administration basically ushered a transitional period led by a national dialogue conference, which led to the creation of, or the adoption of, an interim constitutional declaration, and declared a transitional period for a period of 5 years. We also had some indirect legislative elections last month, where 2/3 of the legislature were indirectly elected, and we're now waiting for the 1/3 remaining to be appointed by the interim president. We also had some form of a larger or a more inclusive government formed in March of 2025, and that the of the current day.
We again experienced some technical problems, so probably we will relaunch the video. So the internet here dropped again, and we cannot hear Mr. Al-Achi, unfortunately. As you know, there is no electricity in the area, so we also work on generators, and we experience also some technical problems with internet connection. So maybe we will proceed with the next panel, and then if we have possibility in future to launch again this video connection with Mr. Alachi, we will try to do it again. So dear friends and colleagues, I'm happy to announce the third panel, which is devoted to the topic of journalists and the war of the 21st century. And during this panel, we will discuss many different experiences and how the Russian-Ukrainian war also is perceived and reflected in many other countries. Which challenges do they have? And let me invite to this panel our distinguished speakers. This is Pietro Cercone. He is the CEO and senior editor from No Pasa Nada, Costa Rica. So please take a seat, Pietro. This is beloved John. She is an investigative journalist from Premium Times from Nigeria. Dear beloved, please take a seat. I hope that the internet connection will be restored and we will have online with us. Oh, carefully. Did you heard? No? Okay. We will have with us online Aziza Nofal. She is a freelance journalist and correspondent of Reporters Without Borders from the West Bank. Also, I would like to invite to this panel Philippe Obaji. He is a correspondent of the Daily Beast from Nigeria. So Philippe, please take a seat. And also we have with us Vladislav Yesipenko. He is a former Crimean political prisoner and journalist of the Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty from Ukraine. And I am Tatiana Pechonchik, again glad to moderate this panel. So, dear colleagues, starting this panel, I would like just to give you a brief overview of the situation for media during this war. As for now, according to the data from our colleagues from the Institute of Mass Information, we have 119 journalists who were killed, and 15 out of them while fulfilling their journalistic duties, and the rest of journalists were killed being as a part of the Ukrainian armed forces, or those journalists who were murdered in the framework of the attack against civilian population. For us, it's important to count every person, every destiny, as it's huge losses for our media sector. We will speak during this panel about threats for journalists who also are in Russian captivity, and I mentioned in the beginning of this conference, we have 26 Ukrainian journalists who are in Russian captivities, either in prisons in the territory of the Russian Federation or in the occupied territories of Ukraine, and we will hear the story of one journalist who was released and who is today with us. But I would like to start this panel from inviting to a special special address Ivan Lyubosh Kirdey. He is a Ukrainian journalist working for Reuters. He survived the rocket attack in the Donetsk region last year when in August 2024 in Kramatorsk. And please, Ivan, the floor is yours.
Very thank you. I'm very glad to be here. Але я, з вашого дозволу, буду українською, мені трошки легше.
I will speak Ukrainian if you allow. In fact, because of the attack that I survived, I have some issues with my memory, so my English may be a bit off, and that's why I prefer to speak Ukrainian, not to mess up figures and facts, and you know, we journalists, we must be very careful with information. So I'm Ivan Lyubosh Kirdey. I'm a Ukrainian cameraman, and I have been working for 12 years as a military cameraman, and I worked for different outlets for RD in German ARD, for Radio Liberty, for Reuters. Now I'm a correspondent with Reuters, and now also I worked for several international and Ukrainian media. And I saw how Russians entered Crimea, the little green man I saw too. And I did filming of Little Green Man, the people who occupied our Crimea. I filmed the events in Ilovaisk, this tragic story Ukraine had to live through. Also with a crew, I went to Debaltsevo. We evacuated Ukrainian prisoners from there. So I saw the war of Russia on Ukraine in quite full. And I did a lot of filming, but on the 24th of August 2024, about a year ago, the Russians hit Sapphire Hotel in Kramatorsk, where journalists were staying. Unfortunately, my colleague Ryan, he was killed, but I was impacted, but still stayed alive. I'm a cameraman, but now I have no eye, and I have some other health problems. But what I lost, what is critical to me, I have a partial memory loss. Thanks God, not full memory loss. And I think that my story is quite symbolic because Russians, they are trying in many ways to erase Ukrainian memory, and they're using different methods. They burn books on the occupied territories of Ukraine. They're manipulating with history. They're doing this propaganda non-stop, and Russia is employing every possible method to erase Ukrainian memory, the Ukrainian identity. That's why the work of journalists, reporters and cameramen is extremely important, because what we do is we document Russian crimes, and I'm sure that further on, these will be used as testimonies of Russian war crimes. And that's why the work of cameraman who shoot this is extremely important. So Russia, when it sets a goal to hide its crimes, what they do, they're using a low method of killing journalists, killing those who document their crimes. And when we were filming in the military positions, and I'll explain why. We were wearing bulletproof vests with press on them, but Russians, they read it not as press, but as like sniper. They read it as sniper, the threat to all the Russians, and but we were constantly at the front lines shooting how Ukrainians work and what Russia was doing and how they're eliminating us. And that's, well, Ukrainian journalists are not as protected in the battlefield as they could be. So why I said that I would explain why we shot there, why we were filming there, because of the army of drones, the Russian drones that are being used now, it's more difficult to get to the positions. That's why now we only film the consequences. So what is also about documenting of Russian crimes. It is therefore important for Ukrainians and for all reporters that work in Ukraine to document these events. Unfortunately, many journalists were killed, and the French photographer, I can't recall his name now. His last name starts with L, and this is a French photographer who photographed a lot. My friend Yaroslav Kanushchak was killed. He was my friend, and a lot were killed being in captivity since 2022. This is very sad. So I can't remember now all their names. I can't recall all these names, but I do read the press, and it's scary what Russia has been doing, and it's a pain. And for us, it's very important to store this information and to archive the photo and video content. And we need to build a strong professional community, not just on the Ukrainian level, but globally. And we need to stand for the standards. We need to verify facts, to use the first-handed sources. And I'm sure your countries are aware of how you struggle for the history of your country, how it develops, so that your voices are heard. That's what we're actually trying to do. And we are now faced with a lot of challenges. Unfortunately, the work of war correspondents is dangerous. It's not about like and heart reactions on Instagram. It's a real work where you can lose your life, and this is quite challenging. And I'm sure, and I believe that evil needs to be defeated and held accountable. Glory to Ukraine.
Ivan, thank you very much for joining us and for continuing to tell these simple but important things. There are many people who know you, who supported you, who wanted you to come back to us from coma, and we are grateful to you. Thank you.
As we see, it is very difficult to tell the truth about this war, and many journalists paid the highest price with their life for doing that. But how this situation is reflected, is perceived in other countries. What do they know about this war, about the reasons, why it started, which narratives are dominating? Now we will hear a lot of different perspectives from different countries, and we will start from Pietro, from Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a country that has free media. It is democracy. Maybe it's one of the examples of the democracy in Latin America. So basically, we can see that media there are free to publicate anything they want. So my question to you, Petra, is how this Russian aggression is perceived by your media? How strong is Russian propaganda? And what ordinary people in your country know about Ukraine and about this war?
Absolutely. Thank you. I'd like first to begin to say that my media outlet's called No Pasa Nada. That means nothing happens. I realize the irony of a media company called No Pasa Nada. But we are a small independent media organization in Latin America, and basically we depend on frontline journalism to do our work. I am not a war journalist or a war correspondent, so first I'd like to provide my respect for all the people that are doing that work and people like you, because it is because of that work that we're able to do what we do. As I've come here to Ukraine, I've gotten to be a little bit closer to those stories. I've conducted an investigation over about 10 days on my own previous to coming to the conference, and I hope to provide just a little bit of context as to what we do. As far as the question on how Latin America perceives the conflict right now, I think we're in a complicated situation. We're very far away from where things happen, and because of that, we depend a lot on big media and big Western outlets to get informed as to what happens. However, of course, we live now in a time where digital media is by far the most important resource we all have. Through TikTok, through Telegram, through Instagram, through Twitter, we're able to see what's really happening. And I think that has made it almost impossible for governments to cover up their war crimes. We have seen this in Russia, with Russia, we have seen this with Israel, we have seen this with aggressors all over the world. But at the same time, it becomes increasingly difficult to kind of tread through that fog of information. The more videos, the more TikToks, the more information we have, the harder it is for us to understand what's really going on. And in the midst of that, and with the media's attention straying away from the consequences of the war and enveloping itself more in the geopolitical consequences of it, the support or not support of figures like Donald Trump, the European Union, the internal politics of Ukraine, I think the Western media has stepped away from the true consequences of the war. Every day we see less of images of the destroyed buildings that are constantly happening, the hospitals that are under attack, the children that are being forced to be underground because their schools might get bombed. And instead, we are constantly fed a geopolitical narrative, which of course is important. I'm not pretending it isn't. The consequences as to why the war happened and how the war will eventually end is really necessary to understand. But during that, we're also missing out on that. And Latin America particularly is a very politicized society where a lot of narratives, both from the left wing and the right wing, begin to take precedent over our most important to-do issues. So The right wing will heed what Donald Trump says and will pay attention to what he's saying, and the left wing will often be party to what Russia is saying. And in the middle of that, there's a lot of evidence for things that are happening in the Ukrainian region that are lost. So when you ask me what the perception of Latin America is, I think we are missing a lot of information, and I think that the best way to combat this is to provide as many resources as we can to independent media and to smaller news organizations to do their job. Those resources, of course, sometimes are financial, but I think free access to places, press passes, resources to go and investigate. That's been my personal experience here in Ukraine. I don't know about other journalists, but my personal experience, I've been granted access, I've been giving interviews, I've worked with fantastic fixers who make our work possible. And I think we should encourage that, because that is the only way for those stories to get to the places that they need to go, where often mass Western media is more concerned with, at this point at least, the geopolitical or political state of the situation rather than the current on-the-ground issues that at least I've seen over the past 12 days that I've been here.
Thank you, Pietro, for sharing these ideas.
Дякую, що поділилися.
America to Africa, to Beloved, to Nigeria, actually one of my favorite countries, which I visited personally. I would like to ask you, Beloved, to share the challenges for the work of Nigerian journalists. Of course, you don't have a war in your country, but still, as I know, there are a lot of problems. There is a violence in the northern part of Nigeria, and also, but even those journalists who work in more peace environment, they also tackle a lot of issues. So, can you please share the most crucial domestic issues which you have?
Thank you very much. Like you rightly pointed out, we're not a country that is fighting or dealing with foreign incursion. And I'm not a conflict reporter myself as well. I've not been on the trench lines before. I've not had to report artillery damages minutes after a strike. But one thing I've come to learn is that the absence of a formal declaration of war does not mean the absence of danger. And in recent times, one thing I have noticed, over the years, one thing I have noticed as a young journalist is the fact that the pressure on journalism and journalists appear in different forms. And as a person who works in a country that is not under war, but even while it is dealing with internal issues, we see how journalists have to endure different forms of attack. Physical attack, online violence, you are at risk of police arrest, you're at risk of legal arbitrary arrest, legal intimidation, through laws rather. Intimidation through laws. You're at risk of abduction when you're trying to go to unsafe zones to report issues, because as much as these areas are not safe because of this insecurity that we're dealing with, someone has to report them, someone has to go there, someone has to tell these stories. So you're doing this and you're at risk of getting abducted, you're at risk of being killed by both state, non-state actors as well. And so all of this sort of puts pressure on journalists. It has psychological effect on the journalists themselves. But I find what I find most striking is gendered attacks, which is something that has also become common as more women are getting into journalism and are actually becoming very active in the media space. And you find that while we have to deal with all the general issues that male journalists have to deal with, we have an additional layer of concern. You are exposed to being needlessly sexualized, to undermine your competence as a journalist. You're exposed to online violence where they're making sexual comments about you and your body in a way that it takes away attention from the work that you are doing. And one thing I've also learned over time is that you cannot allow the value of your work to be determined by public validation, because it's very fleeting. So at some point, the mood of the public changes. At some point, you do a report and the public is pleased with you. They like the report. They believe you've told an important story. And at some other time, you're telling a story that is factual, but they don't like it. Like you're doing a story about the rights of LGBTQ community. You're doing a story about the feminism, about equal rights. The public wouldn't be pleased with that, and you then have to deal with the online violence that comes with that. And so you the evolution of the media space and digitalization of the media has done is that it has created a complex relationship between journalists, and not just with state actors, but with also the public as well. And it is important for us to be very conscious of that as journalists in Nigeria and be able to work through that. And when you think of I believe that all of these issues, including the gender attacks and probably the high chances of harassment for female journalists, is also part of the war of the 21st century.
Thank you. Maybe now we will try to move to the Middle East, and I would like to ask if we have online guests. No. Okay. Then I will invite to our conversation Philippe, who has quite impressive story. He's also a journalist from Nigeria, but he will be speaking not about Nigerian experience, but about West and Central Africa events. He over the past 7 years, he has documented around 100 cases of human rights abuses by Russian paramilitary in the West and Central Africa. And also he was abducted and tortured in the Central African Republic. But nevertheless, he continued to expose these mass crimes, rapes, and oppression by Wagner Group and its successor, the Africa Corps. Philippe, I know that you are traveling so much, so we are happy and lucky that you joined this conference. So my question to you was, what do you discover from your investigation and from your work in the Western and Central Africa? How this Russian paramilitary group, which impact do they have now, and what can you tell us from your personal story?
Well, thank you, Tatiana, for having me. I was looking forward to meeting you, and to everyone out here. I'm so happy that you all can make it here. And it's so good to be here. At some point, I didn't think I'll make it because I looked at how far I will travel and how far I will travel back. But it's good to be here. Well, I've been reporting on the activities of Russian paramilitaries deployed across West and Central Africa for the past 7 years. And it's a very difficult and dangerous bit to cover. And as she said, I have faced a lot of intimidation, attacks, and what have you. The first time I ever came across something difficult was in 2022, just before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So I had been reporting on human rights abuses by the Wagner Group in the Central African Republic and also in Mali. But I didn't know that I was going to be facing something very dangerous. At the time, not too many people, especially in Africa, knew anything about the Wagner Group. So I had some of my contacts within the Wagner Group phone me to tell me that some of their colleagues, about 200 of them, were being flown from the Central African Republic to Moscow on training. And I asked them why. They said because these guys will be deployed to Ukraine's Donbas region. At this time, Putin had not started the full-scale invasion. And as it's always the case when a journalist is pursuing a story, you have to make sure that you have all parties respond to these allegations. So I picked up my phone and then I sent a message to Mr. Prigozhin, the founder of Wagner. And I waited the first day, there was no reply. The second day, I received a phone call from somebody, and he said to me, Mr. Prigozhin thinks you are a fool. That was the reply I got. And afterwards, the insults began. You know, all the online harassments, phone calls with threats, and what have you. Then one day I got a call. This is still in January. I got a call from somebody I knew very well, but he worked with the Wagner Group. And then he said, we are circulating your photograph right now on WhatsApp. And we have a group. I'm quoting him. He said, we have a group, the Wagner mercenaries in Central Africa. we have this group, and on that group, people who have seen your photograph are sharing it on WhatsApp, and they are saying, if anyone finds you, that's the order we have, if anyone finds you here in the Central African Republic or anywhere, maybe in Mali or Burkina Faso, the order is get him arrested or get him killed. So I knew that about myself, but I also know that there are other journalists out there in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and across West Africa who may have been facing this same kind of threat and this same kind of harassment. So it's a very difficult bit to pursue. Investigating the Wagner Group is dangerous. I lost a friend of mine, John Basakuto. He's a Central African journalist reporting on the operations of Wagner mercenaries in the country. And one day he had this meeting with a Russian official. And after that meeting, he went home, started to vomit, and that was how he died. So the Russians did not allow, when I say the Russians, I mean the Russian paramilitaries who operate in Central Africa, they did not allow his family carry out an autopsy on him. So until this day, we don't know exactly what killed him, but his wife and friends all suspect that he was poisoned. So it's not only in Russia or even in Ukraine that we see situations where journalists will focus on reporting on whether it's issues around the KGB or the FSB get targeted. So even in Africa, journalists have been targeted, been killed, for trying to uncover the truth and for trying to tell the entire world exactly what the situation is. So, like Tatiana said, I was once arrested by Russian forces in Central Africa, and I was locked in a small shipping container overnight. And I thought I was going to be killed. I thought it would be my last day on earth, because usually when you fall into the hands of the Wagner Group, you are either shot or beheaded. They love to behead. So fortunately for me, the person who took me to the border, the motorcyclist who took me to the border, where I was arrested, had seen what happened. And then he ran to his friend, who was a senior officer in the Central African Army. So it was this friend of his who came to where I was arrested and pleaded on my behalf. So that's how I got released. Yeah, so I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I have, if I may, and these applauses are for you, for your courageous work in Africa, but I have one follow-up question to you. After the murder of Yevgeny Prigozhin and decline of Wagner Group, what happened with them in Africa? Like, it is like some successor groups, how powerful they are, and what is going on now with these like paramilitary units and their influence?
So Mr. Prigozhin was killed in an air crash in August 2023. So I got into Central Africa in October 23. And if you have to find out exactly how effective the Wagner Group is in Africa, then travel to the Central African Republic, because that's where you have hundreds of paramilitaries deployed. I mean, you have also a significant number of Russian mercenaries in Mali, and then you have a few from the Bier Brigade in Burkina Faso. But nowhere do you have as many paramilitaries as in Central Africa or in Libya. But the operations, the way they operate in Central Africa is quite different from the way they operate in Libya, for example, because in Libya they're working with General Haftar forces and fighting against government forces. So when I traveled, I was going to find out what will be of the group after Prigozhin's death. So there's a guy called Dmitry Siti. So he's been the operational head of the Wagner Group under Prigozhin. So there's another guy called Pevlev who was assisting Siti. So I discovered that these guys were still very much active. And even as we speak, Siti has an office in a beautiful place in Bangui, the capital of the Central African Republic. And from there, he's able to coordinate Russian operations, whether it's on culture, on disinformation, or on military operations. So that hasn't changed the way they operate militarily. And it doesn't matter what they call themselves, whether it's Wagner or the African Corps. So the operations are still the same. The difference now is that you have a guy who's in the Russian embassy in Bangui, keeping an eye on the operational heads like City and Pefilev. Then you also have the Russian MOD now supervising everyone who was active, was present in Bangui. But in terms of how they engage civilians, the idea of seizing gold mines to be able to make profits and help fund the war in Ukraine, that hasn't changed. In October 23, 2 months after Prigozhin was killed, there was a massacre in a place called Koki. That's in the northwest of the Central African Republic. And over 50 people were killed. I went there personally, so I was able to verify that. And that has always been the mode of operation: to seize a gold mine, kill everybody you can see, because usually the people in these communities where the mines are seen as enemies. So it was exactly what we have seen in places like Yanga and Agbado. These are areas where you have massive gold mines in the central part of the Central African Republic. So that hasn't changed. Now, there's an idea, that the Russians have. And what they do is they're trying to promote Russian culture in the Central African Republic, which means in primary schools, children are taught how to speak Russian. Children are taught how to recite the Russian anthem, and children are promised big opportunities when they grow up in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, everywhere in Russia. So that had begun when Prigozhin ran things, and it's still happening right now. So what is different is the fact that when Prigozhin was alive, we had companies like Damville, Midas Resources operating openly, doing business in gold and diamonds and exporting these minerals to the Gulf region where they are sold in the black market. So now you don't have people come out openly to say, I work in Midas or I work in Damsville, but you have people who go underground, and hire gold miners who do the gold and then sell to merchants that have come from Cameroon, from the Gulf region, and even from Eastern Europe. So they don't come out openly to do this, but somehow use proxies. So that's the little difference.
Thank you, Philippe. For me, it was a discovery that not only they Russify Ukrainian children, but also African children. This is something that some new facts that I discovered for myself, and thank you for sharing these stories, which I think are very interesting for the Ukrainian audience. And now we will try to connect Aziza Nofal again. I see Aziza, we welcome you from Kiev, and we're glad that you are online and we were able to connect you, freelance journalist and correspondent of Reporters Without Borders. And now we will have an intervention about the situation of media in the one of the most deadliest place for media workers in the world. Since 2023, at least 248 journalists and media workers were killed from Palestine, were killed according to the International Federation of Journalists and the UN data. So Aziza, can you please share with us what is the situation now and how the media are able to work and cover events amidst that war?
Thank you. And it's great to be with you, especially to hear about our mat and to know that we are not alone in this. Hi, Ivan. Last week we have our colleague Ranin Sawafta. She's correspondent, photographer correspondent for Reuters too, and she injured in her hand, and now she afraid that she couldn't use her hand again to take a photo. And I understand now that we are all the journalists all over the world, the really journalists in danger, really, especially in the under the war. About the Palestinian situation, I will focus in West Bank because I am based in West Bank, not in Gaza. But as you know, the situation in Gaza, it's very dangerous and it's very bad situation for journalists. But what the whole world didn't know that even in West Bank we have to face a very hard situation to make our work in journalists. For me, as a mom and a freelancer journalist, it's very hard to work under this situation. As you know, since the war started in Gaza, we have a very bad situation in West Bank, and we have daily raided on all the city of West Bank, and it's very difficult to do our work because there is no different. The Israeli forces, unfortunately, didn't different between the Palestinian journalists and the Palestinian people, or even the anyone in the city or in the raided. A lot of dozens of my colleagues injured in West Bank, and because I am covering the attack against the journalist for RSF, I document a lot of accident against the Palestinian journalists. Last week, we have more than 20 attacks against the Palestinian, one of them by Israeli settlers. There is seven Palestinian journalists injured by this attack. One of them, a French journalist who come to Nablus, where the attack happened, and he just covering what's happening in the place. And this is mean that there is no protection for the journalist in West Bank or in Gaza and all over Palestine. Sometimes it's be difficult when for me as a mom and journalist. I have 3 kids. One of them, Mariam, it's just 8 years old. And I see how it's difficult to leave here, to go to cover any stories, especially in the hot places in Jenin or in Tulkarem. That's places that there is a lot of attack against journalists, and it's related. She connect these places with killing our colleague Shireen Abu Akleh. And because I am working as a freelancer producer for Al Jazeera English, she always said that, inshallah, the Israeli forces didn't let you come back to work after they banned the Al Jazeera to work and they closed the office of Al Jazeera in West Bank. She always said that they will kill you as they killed Shireen Abu Akleh. You can't imagine how I feel that I can't. I can't told her that it will be okay, because I know that it will not always will be okay. We have to work under the all this dangerous, and we have to cross the checkpoints, and we have to sometime there is shoots us a lot of time. They tag us by a gas bomb, and it's really very, very difficult to have to be a mom and journalist in such these places under the war. I can understand all the journalists, the difficult journalists faced but it's very difficult to be a journalist under the war, even in Palestine, Ukraine, and everywhere. It's good to say today that I am glad for you to be with you, to hear about that we are not alone, as I said before. We not alone by this. We all faced a lot of struggle to do our message. Also, because I am working as investigator report with Arish and with sometime I publish with a Guardian, a Washington Post, some of my work or some of the work I help with this. It's very difficult to make our work in such these places, but we have to work a lot, and we have to always face every struggle to tell the story. If I believe if I am not telling our story and every one of our colleagues withdraw with this mission, we will lose the story in such these places. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aziza. And these applauses are for you and for being courageous and working in such an extremely difficult situation, and also for sharing your personal story. If you can stay with us online for some time when we will have maybe questions from the audience. But now I would like to turn to our last speaker in this panel. This is Vladislav Yesipenko. Now I will switch to Ukrainian. Vladislav Yesipenko.
Vladislav Yesipenko is a Ukrainian journalist, freelancer, who was covering situation in the occupied Crimea for the Radio Liberty and Realities project. And for his journalist work in March 2021, he was arrested, he was detained, there was no connection with him for a long time, he was tortured, and then he was detained and imprisoned. Vladislav was released in summer this year, but not because he was freed as a result of some exchange, but because he completed the sentence that he was given by the Russian authorities, occupation authorities. Now, Vladislav, I would like to give you the floor, and I would like to ask you to share your story, and specifically, could you please tell us how do you get information what is going on in the occupied areas? I mean, your story shows that it's really dangerous. You can pay with your freedom for that. Thank you. First of all, I would like to add to what Ivan, my colleague, said, how our journalists are working on the front line. I have information that, let me start, that there is international protocol according to which all media workers should wear signs on their body armor, on their helmet, press signs. And according to my information, the Russian drone operators are getting rewarded if they destroy such people. So you have to understand, if there is a car or a person and they have this press sign, the drone operators will be targeting them. So probably we have to change this international protocol because and it will save some lives of our Ukrainian and international journalists. And just briefly about myself, about my story. Since the start of Crimea occupation, I was working as a Radio Liberty journalist. I covered the temporarily occupied areas. I did surveys. I covered presidential elections, so-called elections in Crimea. In 2021, I was detained by the FSB officers. They thrown a grenade in my car and forced me to sign papers confessing that this grenade is mine. I refused. Then they told me, we will take you to a place where you will tell everything. Then I thought, okay, where they can take me, maybe they will inject me some truth injection, but they didn't. They took me in some torture center. They tortured me for a day there, and it was happening not only to me, it was happening to many Ukrainian journalists, Ukrainian patriots. They put wires on my ears and electrocuted me. And of course, they beat me, they electrocuted me. It was taking, it was throughout the day. They were torturing me for a day. Then there was a sentence in the court. I was sentenced to 5 years of imprisonment in the Russian jail. I completed this sentence, and in July I returned to tell what is going on there now. And one more point about my friends, the Ukrainian patriots who are my friends. Halina Dovgopola, she is a 70-year-old woman. She is for the 6th year in the Russian jail for the crime she didn't commit. She was accused of the treason. And treason to the homeland. I don't know what homeland they mean, but she's in the jail for the 6th year. She's the eldest woman in the Russian jail. Her health is very bad. She has difficulty walking. And I believe that she and my other friends will be brought home. Another story I would like to tell is about Konstantin Shirin. We had really good friends, and he was accused of spying. He was sentenced to 12 years, and during the detention he was tortured. Unlike me, he was. They electrocuted him through his genitals. They removed they broke his jaw, and he had a lot of health issues, and in 2023 he died in the Russian jail because he was denied of medical help. And one more story about our 3 journalists and civil activists, Besarab, Shtiblik, and Dudka. They were accused of spying and sentenced to very large terms in jail. Shtiblik was sentenced to 5 years. In 2021, he was due to be released, but he didn't. When he was going to be released, FSB detained him again. They put him in the detention center, and in 2022 he was sentenced to 19.5 years of imprisonment. So you see, this person is basically facing life imprisonment. If we don't return them, they will die. So this is what I wanted to tell you about our journalists, about the treatment of journalists by Russian authorities, of people who have a different view, who are patriots of Ukraine, who are journalists. And one more point. Actually, there are many people in Crimea who are waiting for us, for Crimea to be liberated. I was in Kerch in prison, and it was quite close to the Crimean bridge, and all the drones and missiles, they were going above us, the Storm Shadow missile, and you know, and many people, they were joyous, they were happy to see that we are fighting, because there was no information at all. And these missiles, it was as kind of message from our homeland. So, and one more point about Crimean Tatars. I knew many people, many Crimean Tatars there, and they told me that when Ukraine starts liberating Crimea, we will rise up and we will fight against Russians. So they are waiting for Ukraine to come to liberate Crimea, to liberate other temporarily occupied areas, and that's going to happen. Thank you.
Всім нашим спікерам.
So I'm very thankful to our panelists that have been doing great jobs in the places where war isn't going, or in the occupation where some territories are occupied, but they still keep on doing their jobs. And so we still have time for Q&A. And if anyone is willing to pose a question to our panelists, just raise your hand. So, are there any questions or comments? Yes, please. Yeah, Ibrahimova, so in terms of Crimean Tatars, in 2014, when the occupation of the Crimea started, my friends told me, so if there is an army, an advance from Ukraine, we are ready to join it. They were armed with whatever means they had. They were following all the tanks and all the events, and they had their like radio waves, so to say. I was also listening to it. They never saw any Ukrainian army stepping in. It was a great disappointment on the one hand. On the other hand, people realized that just needed time to prepare. And you're right by saying that people are waiting. All my relatives are there. And when I talk to them, it's difficult, you know, because all the Russians, they block all the messengers. So we're always on the lookout for some alternative channels to get in touch. And I remember 1944 and this forced deportation, and that's what Russians are doing now. They are creating laws where they say that they want to oust the ones who are not loyal to them to Siberia. And when I talk to my relatives, I advise that they should keep their IDs at hand at all times. You know, speaking of social media, well, they know my social media pages, so that if we lose touch, they can find me there. And in fact, where my relatives live, it's a place where there is a water reserve, and they did something like that. They untapped, so to say, the water reserve, so that the neighboring villages or cities are flooded. And I told them that if this ever happens again, just to please build a top floor, just attach a top floor to your house. So that's what my father is doing now. So of course, or my parents, my relatives are afraid of what kind of situation can happen to us going forward, but I keep telling them that we're in more in better safety than them. We cannot do much, but we can be a voice. We can be a voice to the external world, to talk to people from other countries, so that it is on the radars, so they So when I hear from people, oh, we're so tired of war, but I find it quite cynical. I tell them, but this is part of our lives, and even if you are tired, you just have a chance to be better prepared for what will follow. We didn't have this chance. We just had a little bit from 14 to 2022, but we didn't expect this horrid war to unfold. And when my father told me about the events of World War II and the scary events and the conditions that they experienced in the Soviet army, but now we are again in similar situation. So when I talk to external world, so to say, I tell them just be prepared, even if it doesn't reach you, just please be prepared. And when I hear that in Africa there is violence, there are tortures because the Russians are there. I mean, we can elicit easily that the whole world has been suffering from Russia. Why can't we join hands in our struggle against one state? So we keep discussing, we keep talking. Let's take the U.S. They say, oh, we're leading our lives, we are tired. I'm not saying that everyone is saying that, but when you speak to ordinary Americans or when you talk to people from Europe, you know, not many people, at least, are ready to listen. Some people shut me up, and then I say, okay, just whatever. I will keep on speaking because I just want to warn you. Colleagues, are there any other questions to our panelists?
I come from Mexico, and this is the first time I visit Ukraine. So I have encountered facts and narratives that I was not aware about from my country. So I really think that there is the need of to form this critical mass opinion towards Ukraine. And what I wanted the panel to maybe reflect on is what could journalists do in a world in which many people do not follow the news anymore? There's big challenge, in general for journalism, not only journalists that are in the hardest situation as yourselves. So do you have thoughts about this? What are the challenges to connect with the audiences, to make new audiences and make them know about these facts? Because despite all your hard work, if people do not read about them, if people just keep attention spans for 15 seconds, then how are we supposed to let the people know what's going on? Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to answer? Philippe?
I just want to say a few words concerning that. And what you have noticed about people not paying attention to the news and where we should find creative ways of reporting these stuff. I think the Russians understand how that works better than anyone else. Now, okay, if you go to the Central African Republic, there are various ways at which Russia is trying to gain the attention of people. So in schools, primary schools, it is forced because children don't have the opportunity of choosing what they want to learn. But then the other ways too, like once in a while, what the Wagner Group has done and what the so-called Africa Corps is still doing is they are producing movies. And in those movies, they try to portray Russian culture, try to portray what Russia intends to do. So you go to cinemas, you can watch something about Russia, and as far as relations with Africa is concerned. And then you go to social media, which is the most preferred choice these days. You find the most influential people in certain countries. And they're not just targeting countries where they have boots on the ground. They're also looking beyond that. Across West Africa, countries where Russia don't operate, like Nigeria, like Togo, like the Ivory Coast, you still have some people who have a little bit of weight on social media, somehow, helping Russia to spread these narratives. And that is why it's important, very important, that everyone, from the president to the ordinary people, get involved in saying a few words about what is true, debunking this disinformation that Russia is spreading, debunking some or targeting or attacking some propaganda by Russia. So to deal with this, it goes beyond just journalists, and not many journalists personally have influence. Like some people have influence with their pen, but in terms of the numbers on social media, the following, that goes beyond the journalists. So we need everyone involved. And I think that's the most effective way. And when I say everyone, I mean from politicians to actors and actresses, on-air personalities, because everyone has got a voice. So when we start from there, we can now also find other creative ways, like also creating movies like the Russians do to counter these narratives. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, please.
How the audience, sometimes the audiences that Russia targets for the information they're trying to spread. We've spoken here earlier about a program in Russia, the Alabuga program, where they manipulatively would I say traffic people from different African countries to their country. And what I found, because I worked on that story with a couple of African journalists earlier in the year, we documented what we found in each of our countries. And what I found particularly striking with that investigation is the fact that they tailor information about the program to target specifically young people, the people that they want to recruit, basically girls. My story was about young girls that were targeting, not even about men, not even about military men that were recruited to the military. It was girls between 18 to 22, and they were using animated images, with AI, to tell stories that resonated with the girls. So these were girls that had to endure, that were going through economic challenges, girls that were probably struggling to make ends meet, girls that were still trying to complete their education and are struggling financially. And they would tell stories of, they would use AI to tell stories of saying, oh, this person has moved from Ghana or from Nigeria to Russia, and now she can afford to send money to her parents or to her family, and now they can live a much better life, and she has a better life in the country, and they have a better life. So it promises things that appeal to the young girls themselves, and appeals to even the parent of the young women as well, because what you find is you see parents, you see family members and relatives who are also trying to get their children to be a part of the program. What I found during my investigation was particularly the illegal, would I say, the very shady way they were being recruited, right? They promised them an opportunity to get educated in the country, but you find during the entire process that nobody asks for your previous educational qualities. Nobody knows if you've gone to secondary school or high school. They don't ask for that at all. They ask for your passport, they ask for all the pages of your passport aside from your profile image. They ask for everything, but they don't ask about your educational background, and it's supposed to be an educational opportunity. But you find that the way the information is portrayed, and because they know they are targeting countries where a lot of people are looking for better opportunities, they tell the stories in a way that resonates with the young women that they are trying to get to come to the country. And I think that one of the ways one can actually target this is to actually do stories or actually target specifically the disinformation. So to say that if you get to tell that, okay, if you get to Russia, you might not be able to send money home as they tell you that you'll be able to send money home, because one of the sources that I spoke to eventually, as we found, was that when you get there, you can't send money home. They were not able to send money home as they assumed they would be when they get to the country they were going to. That's the job that they were going to eventually actually they eventually ended up doing was very tedious and taxing. It was basically exploitation, and they didn't know that before time. So if it would be possible to actually pick specific issues that are tell the stories in a way that it would also resonate to the people with whom they are targeting when they actually spread this disinformation. I think that would be a good way to go about it.
Thank you. Yes, Pietro?
So this is something that my organization works in profoundly. It is choosing and finding the formats that will best go towards the audiences that we target. So we target specifically young people. We go usually 18 to 45-year-olds, Spanish speakers. And when we think about attention spans, a minute and whatnot, we don't see it as something negative. We rather see it as just what's happening. It's the context that we exist in. We can't change it. But it's the quality of the information and the way in which we treat those formats that make the difference. When we look at traditional media, at least in my country, they're still trying to learn how to bridge the gap of attention. And I think that happens a lot with major publication houses. We look at very in-depth reporting, these great documentaries that get stuck on, primetime television, maybe a depository on a website somewhere, maybe a YouTube channel that not a lot of people are going to see, but we're missing those figures, what influencers and content creators have been able to do. You might see on YouTube, a content creator who visits Ukraine gets 2, 3, 4 million views on a video, and then you see an in-depth report on the front line that gets 300 views. And this dissonance between what good content looks like has to get addressed by the media companies that are creating these works. It's, the journalists are willing to put their lives on the line. We're seeing this body, mind, insane levels of dedication to get their work through. And I think there's a failure in the format and how we're reproducing these images towards audiences. And it's not that the formats aren't there. We see it clearly. Content creators are getting millions of views. People have very humanitarian issues at hand. And it's just trying to work with the medium and the formats that we have today. Just a few weeks ago, I don't know if everybody saw this, but in Nepal, a guy was there while the revolution was going on. He's a TikTok guy, was just traveling, and his reporting got more views and more expands than the media outlets that were present on the ground there with CNN and the BBC and whatever. So it's not that people don't want to see what's going on. It's that we are failing as media outlets. Well, I hope that I'm trying to bridge that gap in doing that. And so the problem is, of course, that sometimes you have these great journalists who undergo extreme measures to do this, but the support for them to be able to work with more independent, more creative, more modern media organizations isn't there. And so I go back to this. I go back to what I think can happen is just to provide more access, more ways for people to be able to create this work. And hopefully the work that these incredible journalists are doing will be shown to more people. And, these younger audiences, these TikTok-driven audiences will be able to be part of that more thoroughly. So I think that the formats are there. It's just the media company's job to try to encourage how to bridge that gap, because clearly the work that these men and women are doing is absolutely brilliant.
Thank you very much. We might take one more question from the audience. If there are volunteers, yes, please. You have a floor.
Hello to everyone. Denis Kaplanov, CSO Recovery Office. We are also working with the African continent in terms of debunking Russian propaganda. And what we realized was that this is a specific audience, and it's important to use the right topics, right themes. When we are talking about casualties in Africa, it doesn't resonate, doesn't surprise anyone there. For example, the Sahel region. We are trying to shock Europe with this content, but it doesn't work in Africa. When we show attacks against food security, against the burning grain, this is what resonates with the African society. We see a lot of views, a lot of resonance, and when we are trying to explain that Russia is not an anti-colonial force, they are colonizers. They are trying to purport that they are the successors of the Soviet Union, they are fighting the globalism, but it's not true. They are fighting an aggressive war in Ukraine. They are trying to colonize us. That's why my question is to journalists, for example, from Nigeria. Maybe you have advice for us. It's important to communicate properly for Ukraine. We spent a lot of effort and we failed to miss the bullseye, so to say. So what are the topics, what are the keys to the African society? How do we get better in communicating and overcoming challenges around the African society?
Question, so it's for Philippe and Beloved.
Well, I'll just say this, that you're right, and yes, because we're a country that has domestic issues, that is dealing with insecurity from almost every region. We see these numbers every day. But we are still a country where human stories resonate with readers. So I think one of the things that work is to tell the stories of the people themselves, not just the numbers. We see the numbers all the time. I think this is called media fatigue. We see the numbers, we're used to it, but getting the stories of the people themselves in a way that connects to the readers emotionally. So they walk through the life of the victims. They see it. It's almost as if they are there. They can relate to the human impact in a way that when they read the stories or when they see, whether it be documentary or it be a long form or an investigative piece or whatever ways it is being told, it walks the readers, and as in the case Nigerians, through the emotional journey, the emotional story, as much as the physical process and the trauma and the experiences of the victim themselves. I think connecting emotionally is a way that is a way to resonate with Nigerians.
Thank you.
I think we haven't done enough. Whether it's Africa, whether it's Ukraine, or whether it's the people who normally will be supporting us from the West. And I had the privilege of testifying at the US Congress. There was a hearing on Russia's imperial identity. And I was on that hearing as a witness alongside 3 others. I was the only African. I realized that the American politicians were mostly interested in what the others who came from the Baltic and the Balkan states was talking about than what I had to say from Africa. That is one. 2, Russian money versus Ukrainian money, there's a gap in terms of how much Russia can spend on propaganda and disinformation. Ukraine can't compete, at that level. And that is why the little money, I don't even think that Russia is spending so much on this campaign, compared to how much some people who are seeking to achieve a goal in Africa will spend, some people from the West. But I think that they are targeted, they know how to spend. For example, they could spend maybe $10,000 on flying a couple of journalists from Africa to Moscow on excursion. And some of those journalists may never have traveled, all their lives, and then an opportunity comes to travel to Moscow, and they grab it. And then they could spend another $5,000 on supporting maybe 5 journalists on doing a story, which they call investigative, but the story actually is something linked to Russian propaganda. So I have been speaking to a lot of my friends in Africa, Ukrainian diplomats and what have you. I think they're doing very well with the little resources they have to try to make Africans understand what is happening in Ukraine. But I have made a request directly to the administration, the president's office, and I have said clearly that efforts to make Africans understand what's happening in Ukraine must start from the top. And that will also mean that the president of Ukraine will have to say some words. I mean, it's been difficult, I understand, traveling around, but once President Zelensky tried to embark on a tour of Africa, but after he visited South Africa, Ukraine came under attack, so he had to cut short that visit. and then he returned. But at this point, for Ukraine to have a stronger bond with Africa and make Africans understand the true situation, because many Africans don't know what's happening. That's the fact. And people are believing what Russia is putting out there. Russia has RT, the state-sponsored or state-owned RT, broadcasting from Algeria. And there are over 30 African countries that can access RT on terrestrial TV. So many African nations, particularly in the Sahel, get to listen to Russian commentators every day spread disinformation. So I want a situation where we have a conscious effort by politicians in high offices in Ukraine, celebrities and everyone try to reach out, to Africa. And unfortunately, I have also, on a personal level, made efforts to reach out to as many organizations in Europe and in the US to help fund African initiatives that are helping to combat disinformation and to stem the high influence of propaganda. Unfortunately, in the US, a lot of the stop in funding to USAID and some other organizations have made it very difficult for fact-checkers and other organizations that would have been interested in helping fight disinformation. Because we have to fight this disinformation first for us to be able to at least tell the world exactly what's happening in Ukraine.
Thank you. I think it was quite interesting and productive. And I have the last question from myself, and I hope it will be an easy question for you, to our three guests who made this long journey to Ukraine, to Pietra, Beloved, and Philippe, about your most impressive thing about Ukraine that you discovered. I know that you spent here a little time, but still, do you have maybe some stereotypes that was broken or something which is the most impressive for you? Very short, just in 1-2 sentences. Who would like to start?
So previous to my arriving to the conference, I was able to spend some extra time doing an independent investigation here in Ukraine. I visited the regions of Sumy, the Kyiv region. I think the most impressive thing to me has been witnessing the resilience of the Ukrainian people in the midst of what is a continuous campaign, bombing campaign, a continuous attack on human rights, a continuous attack on civilian centers. I was in Sumy during a major bombing campaign, and while it was going on, people continued to walk around the streets, continued to do their business. And when I asked the fixer that was working with me, he said that this was their resistance. While many of them might not be able to go to the front line, some of them, are out of the age range or unable to fight. Continuing their lives there was their resistance, and so they're holding the city in the way that they can hold it until they can no longer do it, and that to me blew my mind.
Thank you, Beloved.
I'd say I was going to also say the same thing he said, which is the resilience of the people. I mean, I remember I came in and I saw the city, and for a country that has been under attack for years, this such a semblance of normalcy here that I did not expect to find. And then I also spoke with some young people, my colleagues and I, who came together to Ukraine. And I think what was really inspiring was the resilience of the youth themselves, how resolute they were to ensuring that the rights of the Ukrainian people are protected, and they were fighting for their dignity as people and as a country, and they were very determined to hold on to that. Yes, that was what stood out for me.
Thanks.
Well, I already knew about Ukrainian resilience when they said in 3 days, Putin will take over Ukraine. But what happened? The Ukrainian people fought bravely, fought so hard, and 3 days has turned to how many years now? 3 years, and still they cannot take over Ukraine. So, congratulations and well done. But what struck me is the level of hospitality I have seen since last night when we crossed into Ukraine. So they pulled me out of the train, the immigration people, and took me to an office to answer a few questions. I'm not a good friend of dogs, but the dogs in that station were so nice, So it's not about the human beings. Even the pets are very good. I mean, what should be wild, but I'm very happy, very impressed, and really very appreciative of this country, of its people. I want to come back very soon and party.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Друзі, давайте подякуємо нас.
Okay, let's thank our speakers, Ivan, Pietro, beloved, Philip, Vladislav, and Aziza, who was here with us online. Thank you to you all.
We are wrapping up this panel, but I would like also to say some important announcements for you. I will switch into Ukrainian again. Отже, дорогі друзі.
So, dear friends, we are completing the official part of the first day of our conference, and would like to remind that tomorrow we will continue our work, and we will be waiting for you at 9:30 for welcome coffee. And tomorrow we will talk about important topics. We will be talking about people, about mercenaries or victims of human trafficking who are deceived and recruited by Russia. Then we will talk about girl power, about the countering the violence and wars. We will talk about the decolonization and about lessons that we can learn from Latin America in terms of justice. And one more important remark from my side. I told about 26 journalists from Ukraine in the Russian captivity. Just want to remind that we have this activity, letters to free Crimea. If you want to participate, you can write a letter, and we will send these letters to our imprisoned Ukrainians and Crimeans in Russia. And lastly, our official program is over, but at 7 p.m. we will have a side event, unofficial event in the Sense bookstore. It's Krishatik 26. This is an event that was organized by Pan Ukraine, and this evening will be dedicated to the creators who died. The organizer will share 4 stories of people who are worth remembering. So you are all invited to visit Book Sense store. Thank you.